Hi there. So my name is Christine Sibula, and I go by Cece. And I'm going to take you through uh, this piece as I basically go in for an edit on a piece that I don't like. And so let me share a little bit about how this started. The way that it started was that I was looking on my social media and I had made a comment to something 2 years ago. So back in 2024, I made a comment on Thomas W. Schallers. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name correctly. Apologize if I didn't say it correctly. Uh, Page. He had posted like I have had a series of work that I don't like or bad work, and and then eventually it always kind of comes back around to pieces that I do like. How do you all deal with the bad? And my response to it was at the time, I like to play with the bad. And what I mean by that is that I figure if there's a piece that I've created where I'm not really, I don't know, I don't really see where it's going to go. It's not really doing it for me. There's something that's not really quite working. Maybe it's something that I would be kind of wanting to designate for the bin. I hang on to those pieces and I just kind of let them sit there until such time as I'm ready to kind of play with the bad. And anyway, I saw him say, he replied to me and said, I like that playing with the bad or play with the bad. um, I like that. And so I was like reminded of that. Here it is like 2 years later. And I had just missed the reply. And he's an amazing watercolor artist. You should check him out. He's an internationally recognized watercolor artist. He does amazing things with light on his pieces. He does a lot of uh, like landscape architecturally, urban. A lot of his pieces have like stairs and outside architecture, outdoor architecture, like more like urban pieces. And anyway, he has a lot of really very lovely watercolor work. And so I was thinking about that, and I was tired, and I was listening to a podcast by my coach, and or not a podcast, but she was coaching other coaching members. So I was listening to this coaching session, and I thought I'm just going to go ahead and record what I do with this without, without any thought to what I'm going to say about it or anything like that. I'm just going to record my process here on the piece. And then if I want to, I'll go back in and do what I'm doing now, which is a voiceover over that recording. So I was listening to my coach, and she was talking with another member who was um, talking about some very interesting things. And I'll go there in just a moment. But a little bit about this piece. So back in 2025, a lot of times I use art to process through something when I'm feeling things that are just too complex. Like I don't feel like I would necessarily sit down and have a conversation with anyone. I'm much more of an introvert these days. And so I don't always talk about what, my experiences are and what I'm thinking about and things with other people. And so a lot of times I'm processing through things that are taking place in the world and everything very quietly and on my own, without a lot of fanfare. And so for me, this was a piece like that, where what had happened was that back in July of 2025, I think it was over the 4th of July weekend, there was a horrible tragedy that actually happened. And it was down in Texas where the water swelled quickly in an overnight camping experience, and all of these children who had been, who had gone there for the weekend. I think there were 27 or 28 children, and camp counselors passed away that night. were swept away in this this horrific torrential downpour that happened over a period of a couple of hours, where it swelled really quickly. It swelled up to the camp, and they were just basically washed away. And I was having a really hard time processing that, because I mean, I'm a horseback rider, and I have a lot of friends at the barn that have young children who are coming, and they're learning how to ride horses. And so I see little girls all the time at the barn that are, learning how to ride their first horse, and, learn how to trot for the first time, and then canter, and then eventually they start jumping, and then they start competing. And so I watch these kids grow up, and over the last, several years while I boarded my horse there, I've seen a lot of kids and a lot of parents, and I always am thinking and processing how much these parents love their kids, and how much time they spend really investing in their futures and investing in their loves and their passion with horses. And I think a lot about my own childhood, where my parents invested with me with my horse, because I was in high school and learning how to, um, you know, uh, ride a horse too. And so it was a part of my life growing up. So there are a lot of reflections that I have that are quiet while I'm just sitting there working with my horse and doing things. And I say hi to the moms, and they're lovely, lovely people. And I find that horse people are just amazing, loving, wonderful people as well. And so I um I was thinking about, like, this tragedy when it struck. I mean, I really had a hard time processing it. It was not something that I was able to quickly jump off of. I heard this thing that happened, and I think the first time I became aware of it, I was on social media, and it was a young girl who was saying that her parents were camping right in that area, and that she hadn't heard anything from them since the accident had happened, and had anybody seen them. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this young girl or young woman is asking about her parents, and then there are all these parents that are trying to figure out what happened to their children. And so of course it really came on my radar. And then of course it was even bigger than that, because it was Camp Mystic. It was the name of the camp. And I was thinking to myself, how did this tragedy even happen? How did this even happen? And what it was is that the rain uh torrentially came down, and we're having all these different weather patterns now, right? So I'm seeing it, like, at our house too, where we've had, like, sometimes the rain just comes down so quick and so heavy, and we have flooding in the back, and things that are just things that were never there and never part of my life earlier on. And so I was kind of processing through all of these different things. And that's usually how I'll sit down to get at a painting. But at that time, so maybe like a week passed, right? And I probably had, a lot of tears and a lot of things kind of welling up, and I just kind of have to let my body process through those things. And it wasn't that I was impacted directly by it, because I didn't know any of the families, any of the parents, any of the children, nothing. But I was just like, it was such a massive loss, that to think that these kids, their parents are like sending them to this faith filled weekend where they're going to be looking at their fellowship and their relationship with their creator and nature and all of those things. And then this thing happens that takes them all away overnight. So, um, this is where I want to talk about how painting and journaling and art journaling can really help you process through a lot of things, where you may not even realize that you're actually processing it. So for me, what happened was that I sat down with this canvas that I had. It was a half sheet, and it's a Saunders Waterford. And I really wanted to work with these three painting new tubes of paint that I had gotten from Rockwell. I had several that I had gotten, but I really liked how they were shaping up on my canvas. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, these are the way that the pigmentation, as it's working on the canvas, it separates into different colors, and there's a lot of granulation, and they're almost like two and three colors in one particular tube of paint. So it's not like you can, what is the word that I'm looking for? You can't predict it. It's like you are in concert with the water, and there's something that's happening there as you're painting that you can't control. And I love that. So what had happened was that shortly, I mean, like it's maybe like a week or 2 weeks later, and this picture came up where I saw, um, I'm gonna look and see if I can find this here. Where what I saw was, it was an overhead, an aerial view of the waterway, this tree-shaped pattern that had formed in mud and silt and in the waterway. And I had noticed that that was happening in our backyard too when we were having a lot of rain. If you follow the rain pathways, you can really see where that silt sort of merges and turns into these like almost like veins, and arteries in the dirt. It's kind of fascinating to see after the water passes through and passes away and through that. So basically, what I did was, I had this painting and I was looking at this overhead photographic shot of the what it looks like is like almost like a tree of life inside of the mud, inside of the river pathway. And I was thinking, wow, like wouldn't that be so cool to paint something like that? I just wanted to paint the almost like the branches of the trees and all of those things. So I wasn't actively thinking about anything other than just like what a cool uh what a cool thing that happens in nature, are these tree of life things that kind of emerge in the mud and in the water. And I'm looking to see if I can find what it's called. It actually has a, uh, pardon the little dings. You might hear some dings coming through. Um, so it's called something, and I'm looking for what the actual word is. I had it here on a screen. Um, what is this called? It's a certain process of, anyway, I'll come back to whatever it's called, but it's actually a known, um oh, maybe on this tab here. It's tidal mudflats, estuaries, and river deltas that are often revealing dendritic patterns that resemble a giant tree of life. And so that's what it was, is that I was like, somehow I was trying to, um, see the good in this somehow, that there was somehow a good that came out of this. Maybe that, all of these children were called back to be with our creator, and teaching us on so many different levels and calling attention to so many different things and all of that. And so I was creating this like tree of life or something, and it doesn't look at all like the photograph of what I saw. So the working with the watercolor and the water didn't exactly create the tree branches, and those things as that I was anticipating it might. But anyway, so I wasn't really thrilled with it. It's been over a year. It's been sitting there as a canvas. I did love seeing what the Rockwell watercolor paint did to the sky and to the greens and everything. But I pulled it out this time, and I decided that I had some, at this point I had some of the Graphitints by Derwent. And so I had both the, what are these called? I had both pencils and big chunks of charcoal, essentially, or colored charcoal that were from the Derwent Graphitint series. And so I started playing with the edge of that, where I was kind of dipping it in the water and going and following some of the patterns of what I saw with the paint that had already been laid down, and then going in with, my paintbrush after that, and kind of working some of those areas into lines and moving them along. And So I found it to be very interesting while I was doing that process. I thought that was really kind of fun, and um, I used both a couple of the different colors and the browns with it. And I was trying to get it up to the camera, but let me see here. Oopsie, here are my little. So they're Graphitant extra large blocks by Derwent, and I'm looking to see what are the colors that I was using. There's a really dark brown, which was like a raw umber, and that sort of reminds me, it was a little darker. And then I used a really pretty burnt umber, which I really liked in there. And then there was a third color that I was using on there, which was the port, which is a really beautiful color as well. It's kind of like a reddish brown. It looks a little bit like wine, which is why I think they call it port. And so I was using those and then going in with my paintbrush and um, kind of working through some of the line work. And I was also going in with the pencil here. Let's see what I have here. I was going in with the Graphitant pencils because the pencils also have they come in the same colors. So I had the port and I was using the port with it. And then I think that I kind of switched it up because what was happening was that it was getting too brown, too muddy for me looking, and I really wanted it to have a little bit more color in there. And so here I'm using the Stabilo All pencil. Stabilo All is a really, it's what kind of started me down this path of um, using a water-based pencil. um, I had water-based, like watercolor pencils in the past and used them and not really found them to be that fulfilling when I had used them. But these Stabilo All, the orange and the brown that I had, those really give off a combination of the right amount of color when you mix it with water. When I mix it with water, either by spraying directly onto it, it kind of softens out some of that pigmentation and it just moves in really pretty ways. And then also you can use your paintbrush to go in and sort of do some fine line work with the paintbrush. And so that's what I'm doing in here, is kind of bringing in some of those oranges and some of trying to warm it up a bit, I think is where I was at with this. And I think that the warming up was working pretty well. I mean, I was happy with what I was accomplishing. And I think that it really had a nice, it was adding in a lot of depth, a lot more depth, a lot more color. Again, I really kind of released the need to create the tree of life in this anymore at this point. I kind of was looking at the overall external shape that I liked, which I'm not sure even what that is, but I liked that shape. Um, and I thought it was kind of interesting. And then I liked playing with the color waves, and then looking between the lighter areas and the darker areas and blending in to some of those areas. Uh, I should do a close up shot of how it really turns out at the end so that you can really see some of the detail work as to how it really turned out. At some point in here, I decide I want to use some yellow ochre because I'm trying to brighten up the center. And now what I want to talk about actually is the what was kind of happening with as I was listening to my coach. So I'm listening to my coach, and she's coaching another person who's on there, and this woman happens to be a, a vet who she doesn't say that initially. She says this later, but she's basically like stopped doing just her plain coaching in her practice because she wasn't getting clients enough, and so she needed to go kind of back into get a job and make sure she has her regular income. So the job that she chose was to work with vets who were experiencing trauma on their trauma hotline that they can call into. And she was saying that she was concerned that it was going to just take so much energy from her and drain her to the point where she wouldn't want to continue to work on other aspects of her business and building out her own private business separate from that. And my coach kind of challenged her and said, well, it's interesting because, and this is the story I would have shared directly, but I don't, I mean, it's a private conversation essentially in there between coach and, everyone agrees that as part of our coaching that we're not, so I'm just sort of giving you the big sweeping information here, but still trying to keep things private for the person who was having the coaching done and for the coach as well and for me. So as we were in there, I'm listening, and what this woman's talking about is how she's concerned that it's going to drain her, which I think a lot of times happens, right? If you're trying to do second a secondary source of income and you're thinking, all right, I want to, create my side hustle or my side thing that I'm doing that might eventually become my full-time gig and everything. We all want to do that. And then a lot of times we're back in the workplace. And then at the end of the day, we're like, I am just so exhausted from what I did in my normal job that I don't have it to give to this other dream that I've been working toward. But my coach said some things that it just really shocked me that I thought were fantastic. And one of the things that she said was how amazing it is that the person who married her, her pastor, so the person who married her and her husband, um, she she loves her job, and part of being a pastor is that she does trauma work. And so she shows up on the scene when big things happen, like earthquakes or like, major things within a city or something like that. And then she goes and works with people one on one while she's there. And one of the things that she does in that role is notify people of the loss of their loved one. And her take on it, they were having discussion around that. And her take is a pastor or whatever about this. It's kind of like, I don't even know how you do that kind of work. That's got to be so hard. It's got to be awful. And she's like, oh my gosh, I love my job. And I'm always so grateful when I am the one who's chosen to go and sit with the families and help them through this time in their lives, which I thought was very interesting because as I'm sitting here and I'm painting this, it's kind of like I'm in the background thinking about the initial story that I told you about of what had happened a year prior. And I was thinking about all of that. And then I was thinking about this woman she was talking to, and she was saying that, she loves her job because she loves being able to go and help people when they're in their biggest crisis moment. Like to her, it makes her so happy because she knows she's the best person to help to tell them this difficult information that they're going to have to absorb and sit with them as they begin to absorb what's taken place. And so anyway, she thought that was a really interesting take, and she was sharing this with their coaching client. And the coaching client was like, oh my gosh, well, I ended up using that hotline myself as a vet coming back, and I needed it, and it really helped me. And so I feel like this is my way of giving back and everything. And she was like, yeah, I can kind of see that and sit with that about how I am the best person to do this because not only have I been where they're at, but also like this is something that I feel like I'm really talented at doing. So hence I'm sitting here and I'm still painting and I'm just like going away and where my mind starts to go. So I'm listening to this coaching in the background, but I'm also wandering. And this is about how um, you can use your painting and it starts to heal you and heal your mind and heal your brain as you're processing through something. So I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, wow, that's fascinating because all of those years when I was in college and, when I was back in college, I had my dorm room and my person who shared the room with me, um, my roommate, like she was there for 3 weeks and then she was like, college is too much for me and she checked out. So I ended up not getting a second roommate because people had already found their room placements by that time. So I had an extra bed in my room and I had the room to myself. And so I kind of made that extra bed up like a little sofa or whatever. Like instead of like a bed, I made it so that people could come and sit there with pillows and stuff and they could hang out. And over the course of the year, I had every girl on that floor and probably from several other floors. I had other girls that would come. We'd become friends. We would chat, whatever. We're talking about school. We're talking about relationships. We're talking about our families. We're talking about whatever girls talk about, right, in college. But over time, things started to come up like, yeah, when before I left and came here, my dad was really sick with cancer and he passed away and it was really hard and blah, 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 blah. And so then it's a really more of a story around what's going on around the cancer. Another girl had uh, been terribly violated and had a horrific story about that. Another had, issues within her family with her brothers. Um, and inappropriate sexual behavior disorder and things like that. So what happened was that my room kind of became the place where we even lost one of our friends that year. She was driving home with a puppy in the car and she drove off the road accidentally because she didn't have the puppy secured in an area. She just was playing with it and holding it, and she went off the road and flipped the car and she passed away. And so it was processing her loss throughout that year. So there was a lot of grief. And what I realized is I'm sitting there and I'm flashing through my mind of the people that I help because I'm thinking, I'm a life coach. I have a background with my master's of science in organizational psychology. I started out studying clinical psychology and counseling psychology and uh, clinical counseling and health psychology. And I stopped after I was teaching or learning industrial organizational or business psychology. So I have my master's of science in organizational psychology, but I spent almost a decade of my life really studying clinical counseling and health psychology prior to settling into my organizational psychology piece. And then I became a certified life coach with Coach Tools and also with the Proctor Gallagher Institute on looking at manifesting the things that you want to manifest in your life. So I have a huge library in here, like huge library in here and in another room in the house that's like full with books that a lot of which I've actually read. Not all of them have I fully read, but many that I've fully read. And so I literally have spent years and years and years studying that, studying human behavior, studying entrepreneurship, studying all these different things because that's my fascination. Like, if I could look on the wheel of life in all of the different areas on a 1 to 10 scale, I would be at least at 20 or more on the learning curve around things like this. So, I'm thinking as I'm listening to this and I'm flashing back to like different times where I've really helped clients because I'm thinking, I'm my life coaching business hasn't really just been rocking since I launched it. And I feel like maybe I'm not, marketing it correctly or really reaching out to the people that I actually help a lot. And so people really do come to me when their lives blow up. That's usually when I take center stage in their lives on some level after they've lost a child, after they've experience some form of loss, or like maybe they're married and their marriage is falling apart and there are circumstances that are so surreal that they can't even fathom telling like their parents about it or their siblings about it because they're mortified that they've married this person and then all of this stuff is happening that they don't even feel comfortable talking about yet with their families. And so I'm the person that they'll talk to in that situation. Or maybe it's a very complicated situation where around things that have to do with like finances and illness diagnoses and other things with their spouses and partners and how they're trying to navigate you know making sure that they can, one, take care of themselves by having another job. Maybe that means they have to move, maybe that whatever. It may also be navigating difficult things in their current job with like someone. So all of those things. So let's bring it back in here. And what I'm saying is that I realized as I was listening to all of this that I feel like I'm a grief coach. That really what I help with, if I could narrow it down to one freaking word, it would be grief. Because most of the time, not that we spend all this time being in grief. I mean, I laugh with my clients. We find the humor in situations, we talk through things. A lot of times we're in middle and higher zones in life, but then there are times where it's really heavy and really deep and where they really need to process that. And I'm a person that sits with them through those times as they're going through those things. So all of this is kind of taking place as I'm listening in the background with my coach and I'm working on this piece. And this is where I started using white to bring in white. And I have to tell you, this one product is what I used in this whole area with just water. It's an acrylic ink, which is super opaque white acrylic ink from Holbein. And the number on it is A1943. I got the larger of the two. I found a small one and then there was a larger one, and I just know that I'm going to use it. So it allows you to have lines that are like marker lines, airbrush lines, pen lines, and brush lines when you use it with a brush. So that is the only product that I'm putting on top of this. And so the light is coming through in this. And I think that I'm processing my own, like on some deep levels as I'm working through this. I'm both bringing light into this image, and I'm thinking of like maybe how when souls cross over and the light that shines and the light that's left behind in the lives that have been touched, and then the life that as life moves out of physical form and into another form, the light that's happening there. And so I just kept going with this, so I'm going to let that continue to sort of play in the background. I used a brush with it, I think, and then I also used a spray bottle occasionally. I have two different types of spray bottles. One is a regular like spray that you would just, use your finger and spray with it. Like a traditional sprayer bottle. And the other is one that has a little bit of it's one that they've started using now more for like if you're going to wet hair or if you're going to wet, like where it has like a more diffuse spray that comes out of it that's really like a slower spray, and it's a more diffuse spray. And so I have those two water bottles that are next to me and this ink. And I'm just playing on this piece and bringing in as much of this light as I can to uh, really just give it life in this. And it totally started to morph and change for me as I was doing this. I mean, big time, totally started morph and change. And so that's what um, I want to focus on here, is just letting you know that I was doing different things in the places where the the stars are more like diffuse. There's more water there, or I put down the paint and then sprayed with water to open it out a little bit. So you'll kind of experiment as you're playing. And then there are times where I was kind of going along the edge of a line, and you'll see there that in a lot of places I was just taking my finger and tapping the top of the brush to lay down little tiny dots of the ink as it was being used on there. But I think that's all I did all the way until I felt like complete inside of myself while I was working on this. That's an interesting thing I'd like to also talk about in a painting, is that when you get to completion, um, like how do you know that something is complete? For me, part of what it was that I think that the coaching session came to an end. So I was listening to it and it came to a wrap, and I was like, wow. And so I was sitting there kind of in the quiet doing the remainder of the piece at the very end. And also, I think it's something where you start to feel the weight and the distribution across a piece. For me, a lot of times it's never really like clear exactly what it is that I know exactly why I stop a painting, but it's usually that I get to a point where I feel like I've put as much as I want to of that particular product in that, or in I've laid in as much as I want to in that space. And that there's also balance from left to right. There's balance from top to bottom. That if I were to set it up and kind of look at it, that's the next thing I do. I'm actually looking at the piece right now that is done. And I kind of left it not really knowing if I was for sure done or not, because I thought that what would be really cool is to possibly come back in with some of the watercolor from that I used originally and laid that down and come back in with those 3 tubes again of the main colors that I used and then add into this piece. So I would potentially add more, but I also kind of love it just as it is. And then, uh, my mom at one point stepped in and looked at it and saw it, and she was like, "Ooh, that's nice. I like it," or whatever. And so when she gives me a seal of approval on a piece, a lot of times I'm like, okay, maybe it's done. That's the other thing, is that sometimes when she gets excited about it, because the problem is that if you start to overwork a piece, you can really lose some of the magic of what that piece is for you. And so there's a real fine line between creating into it and having it feel really beautiful and having it like kind of expand and lift you up and lighten and move you through to the other side where you're like, wow, I really love this thing that I created. And that can feel really good. But then at the same time, you can have this other thing where if you keep working it or overworking it, where it just starts to feel like your energy kind of is dissipating as you're continuing to work on it. So I think that's always like uh, one of my mentors, Jean Haynes. She does amazing. Her site is Watercolor Inspiration with Jean Haynes, and she's an amazing. She's like won awards too, and she's like an amazing artist, and she does a lot of atmospheric backgrounds and atmospheric colors, and she does these things. So, when I listen to her, a lot of what she's said over the years really has to do with not overworking a background and sort of letting that atmosphere open up without overworking it. It's a nice balance that you find, and so um, when I feel like I'm achieving that with a piece, and I kind of am like, okay, this is what I'm going for. So anyway, I think that as I was working on this piece, two things were simultaneously happening. One is that whereas when I first did the piece a year ago, uh, I almost felt like I was doing the piece and that like the souls were being taken into the earth um, with the way that I did it. And when I was done, it didn't feel complete to me. It didn't feel like I had achieved what I wanted to achieve with the piece. It didn't speak to me in any way. So it was going to definitely be a bin piece at that point, because I was like, it's not doing for me what I need for it to do, but it did something for me at that time, which was to help me process that, like, um, the idea that sometimes when something happens to a large group of people, all at the same time, that's something traumatic and something very difficult to really integrate into your mind, and it's a massive loss on the scale of community and within families and everything like that. When you're looking at that thing that happens, there's something to that there's something about how there's like a collective lesson that is to come from that information. So to me, it was about like somehow there was something collectively that was about bringing awareness to we're living in different times now where um, we need to be even more cognizant than ever of protecting our loved ones, and that there are these things that are happening with weather events and things like that, and that we're not really well prepared for how do we handle these different weather events when they just come up out of nowhere. We don't fully expect it that it's going to happen that way, and then it happens way differently than what we would have ever anticipated, and it goes completely wrong. So how do we do that as a community, as a world, as we are looking at those things? How do we handle those things? So I feel like in many ways that this experience also, being that these children were there for a religious retreat within a Christian community, and I think it was like they didn't say what specific. It was just like it was a generalized Christian like weekend and faith and fellowship and everything about how to go through a tragedy like that and maintain your faith in something greater and not let it destroy your faith when something that tragic happens, and how to find like the good within this terrible tragedy that has affected all of these people, right? So there's that aspect. So all of those things were things that I was processing. And then on top of that, I was also stepping them into the light in my painting. That they were being, to me, it was about like their souls being released into the universe and back to their creator. And what a beautiful thing it is that they were being released back to their creator in a sense, regardless of circumstance, that is still just there was something that was beautiful in that collectively there was something that they came together as souls. Like I believe in like a spiritual contracts, that there are things that we are, before we ever even come to the earth, that maybe we agree to do with our lives, and just by the way that we live them and through example and through whatever it is that takes place and however things kind of come together, that there's something that we've done. And so there was something in this too about how they'd all essentially delivered their gifts to the world through this experience that is still impacting people today, and making them think differently, look at things differently, be more aware for future generations, all kinds of things, and so that there's higher good that may have come out of this as well. I know it's a difficult topic. It's a really difficult topic, to be honest. Um, and then with that, I did not feel the same type of depth of sorrow and grief that I did a year ago. For me, I think that it had sat there sort of with other canvases, that and just sort of was for what it was, for what it helped me process a year ago. And then at this time, it also was helping me to process releasing some of those things energetically and letting go of it in a way that was transmuting that energy through this piece. And of course, I was thinking about that for like the woman who had to transmute her own energy when she was calling that vet number herself to save her own life after she came back from war. And how now she's going to be a facilitator for others that are brave enough to pick up that phone and call and get the help that they need through that, and that she's going to be facilitating that for them. And that also, how amazing that my coach helped her to flip that thing in her mind so that she could be looking at this experience and seeing something really positive with going back to work and helping people and delivering her gifts to the world. And so she flipped it in her mind in a way that is like, that's the power of coaching, right? Where it can be one thing that one thought that changes something from a really heavy place to a place of empowerment and reclaiming your power and feeling better in your life, and it long-term benefits from that, that's going to stay with that woman for the whole rest of her life. So how amazing that my coach is delivering her gifts to the world, because she has the ability to see those things, articulate those things, and talk with her clients in that way. So that was also amazing to me. And then I also think in terms of my own, like when I'm looking at my own things and my next steps, I'm thinking that, um, oh, this was the other piece. I had been watching another artist while she was doing a collage, and she was, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name actually, but she was talking about how she had lost her son 14 years prior, and about how they don't do grief. That she had like a sculpting business, and so she would do these sculptures, and she would send off the emails to the small companies that she was working with that liked to buy some of her inventory to sell in their stores. And that she had finished this line around grief and around loss and sent it off with all of the explanation and everything to all of her buyers, and that it was silence, like total crickets. Nobody bought, nothing happened. And finally, she went to one of the store owners that she had a better relationship with, that was more friendly with her, right? And she was like, "Can I ask you what's going on here? Like, will you just be honest with me and tell me?" And the woman came back and said, "Well, I need to tell you, the reason that I we don't do grief. We do weddings, we do graduation, we do birthdays, we do anniversaries, but we don't do grief." Um, in terms of their product line of what they sell to people. And she said, I really thought that was a shame, because at least I know that after losing my son, that if I had gotten something like this, it would have been really comforting to me to have it. And so I believe that there is a market for it. But what I realized was that it's one of those things where people just don't, um, where they don't do grief, where we as a country, as a nation, where a lot of people don't have a place to go to talk about their grief. And so it gave me, in a strange way, an additional layer of courage to really call myself a grief coach, saying, explaining that I help with that when people are going through things that are really difficult for them to process in their lives. Not counseling, I'm not a grief counselor, but I'm a grief coach, and where we're looking at going forward, how do you manage through your life with a loss that has taken place. So it's different than counseling, it's actually coaching. Um, and where we're looking at, all right, maybe some big changes have happened and you're needing to redefine the terrain of your life going forward. Like maybe it involves a move, maybe it involves, um, you know, uh, downsizing, maybe it involves, um, you know, coming to terms with the loss of a relationship and what that would mean and going forward, and then redefining what is it that you want for your new relationship as you go forward, or what is it that you want to redefine for your relationship with yourself as you move forward. So there are a lot of different elements to this, a lot of different pieces, and I think it's real important to talk about some of those things. And so anyway, I think that this it comes back to full circle, where we talk about how art journaling can really help you as you are navigating difficult situations in your life, and that art journaling can be healing. It can heal you in a lot of ways, and that there are awarenesses that come to you in really strange ways, but it's not necessarily by sitting with a bunch of really sad feelings and crying a ton. you know, like you could just be sitting there and experiencing um joy, like I was experiencing joy while I was painting. I was in a really happy flow state, and I was enjoying what I was looking at and enjoying what I was creating, and I wasn't over analyzing what all of the different things were or what it meant as I was adding in different paint colors. And as I was playing along, I was actually just listening and to the podcast, and I was sitting with my thoughts, but I wasn't in a place of active pain at all. In fact, just the opposite. My brain was really happy. I was happy to be playing with colors and with water and with some of these different looking at the variegation. And I was thinking about rock structures and how rocks are variegated, and I was thinking about sand, and I was thinking about the earth, and I was thinking about greenery, and I was thinking about warmth and colors and all kinds of things that had absolutely nothing to do with anything sad or anything traumatic or anything difficult. But these other thoughts kind of like flashed through my mind in the interim as I was going through and painting some of these different elements. And then maybe a day later or 2 days later, I was like, wait a minute, I got an answer there for something that I didn't really expect an answer to. And actually a question that I hadn't even taken to the board. So it wasn't like when I sat down to paint this piece that I was thinking about my life coaching business or anything around that, or how I market things, or how I talk to people about what they're experiencing in their lives. I wasn't thinking any of that. I was literally pulling out this painting that I hadn't done anything with over a year. I was playing with the bad, right? And sort of taking my own advice again, right? That I had said 2 years earlier. I'm going to play with the bad and see if I'm able to do anything with this that I end up liking. And if not, still no problem. It can still go into the bin. So all of these things were sort of going on in different layers, different levels of awareness and different layers as I was playing with the paint and doing these different things, and also just trying to learn a little bit more about photographing my artistic process as I'm sharing with you on YouTube or as I'm sharing in my Patreon group. I do have an active Patreon group, and it's under my name, Christine Sibula. So if it's patreon.com/Christine Sibula, ChristinaCibula, as in boy, ULA. And so you can join over there. You can join for free. I have some cool things that we've done in the last couple of months, and I've been trying to learn how to like make sure that that group actually is getting some exposure so that people will come and join for free and potentially support the channel as well by joining one of the paid tiers. um, it's not expensive to join. It's a fun place to be. And a lot of what we're doing in there, and in addition to what we're doing here with some of this, is I'll be talking techniques, I'll be sharing different things as we go. But I wanted to also, like with this piece, I thought, well, maybe I could put this up as my, one of my first videos on YouTube. um, I had a channel from many years ago, but I pulled down the videos that were related to that because it feels like it's too far off from this. And this is the direction that I'm going in my life right now, with grief and also with art journaling for healing, and talking about what it is that when you are engaging in your art and what happens in that process, and what are some of the things that come up. Because I think a lot of times people don't give themselves the time and the permission that they need to sit down and do the painting and the art journaling when that's exactly what they need. It's exactly in that activity that there's relief that's found. It's exactly in that activity that something mindless happens that's also mindful, and where things start to emerge and thoughts start to emerge. And it's almost like you're having a conversation with your piece in a way that's really gentle. It's very right brained, it's spatial, it's not linguistic, it's not language based. And most of the time when I'm painting, I actually paint with music, and music that makes me feel like I want to dance a little bit. And so I sort of just let myself move into the piece with good beats happening and with good music in the background. And just almost like that feeling that I used to have when I was, say, maybe in college and I would go out with my friends and we would go dancing somewhere and the music would be going and you get out on the dance floor and you go and you're just like really in the zone. That's what happens for me when I paint. Normally, I paint with music that's like dance music and lighter music, but also like dance music. And and I usually let that kind of be the driving force. But in this particular case, I was just actually sitting down to listen to a podcast, and I thought, well, I'm just also going to record myself painting this while I'm listening to the podcast. Or it's not a podcast. I'm sorry, it's a coaching. It was actually like a full on coaching session where she coached with other people as well. And I was listening to the replay of that, and it just really helped me on so many different levels in so many different ways. So, in this area here, what we're looking at is something that I'd like to call the pause that refreshes. The pause that refreshes. So, this is where you might be in your work and you want to take a little bit of a breather. I wanted to take a little bit of a breather from that super opaque white, and uh, I let it dry. I let it dry in certain areas, um, and where it was drier in certain areas at that point. And so here I go in with this Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2 crayon. So previously, I believe you saw me going in with some of the orange Stabilo All. Uh, I love the Stabilo All, and it blended out, as you can see in there in the center and toward the top. And with this, I went in with the Neocolor 2, again in orange, to like bring up the vibrancy of the color that I feel like it was there before. But as I was adding in some of that other, the Derwent, um, the Graphitin block, I think I darkened it a little bit too much. So I wanted to bring back up some of that vibrancy again, some of that warmth. And then here it looks like I decided to go back in with my super opaque white. And that's the Holbein acrylic ink super opaque white. And I love this stuff. I don't know, um, I've worked with it a little in a couple of different pieces, and on this one again, I love the effect that it had. I trusted it enough to come back in on this piece. I'm new to this actual product, but I trusted it enough after the art journaling work that I had done to come back in on this piece and really work it um, pretty aggressively here. Where I think I sprayed the canvas with some water, and then I went in and I'm splattering with using that paintbrush and tapping on it with my finger. And then you can see in the central areas of the canvas where, as it's hitting the water, it's, you know, uh, interacting with the water in a way that I can't control. So I love that part about it. And then in the drier places on the canvas, the dots are going down more as dots. And like I said, I'm really being pretty aggressive here, and I know that as I'm working through it, but I just am loving the effect, and I'm really happy with adding all this light into this piece. And with that, I'm also thinking about, um, the brilliance of souls, the beauty of humanity, um, all of the good in the world, all of the good, even amidst the things that might be difficult for us when we look at it, when we see it, when we're experiencing it, that there's always beauty even in the difficulty of the hard moments, in terms of what it teaches us about ourselves, in terms of how we learn. Um, and sometimes it's only through these hardships and these really difficult things that we grow in ways that we would not have grown otherwise. Um, and so I'm looking at all of this as I'm pulling together this piece, as I'm working through and adding these whites in here, and just really loving the effect of this. So I definitely hope you give this a shot. One thing that'll happen with this acrylic ink is that when it dries, then you can go back in with watercolor over it and it will resist. It will act as a resist in a sense too. So you can do more things with it even later on as the painting continues to emerge. Although I may leave it with this because I just think it's very beautiful and it really has transformed a lot of and transmuted the energy that I came into this with, that I started with. Um, and it is bringing me a lot of joy just as is. So um, I'm actually looking at it now as I'm doing my voiceover, and it turned out beautifully. Alrighty, so now what I'm looking at as I'm going through is look at how much lighter it is, and all those bursts of light actually in there were bringing me so much joy as I was sitting there looking at it under the light. And it still is bringing me joy. Like when I see it up, hanging up, it's just makes me happy to see it. And it sort of reminds me, I have a, if you look at the earth from top down, you know, when you're looking at like from the space down, from space down to earth, and you're looking at just the top of the earth, but then you start to see where there are light grids and light patterns on the earth. There's like a whole network of light in there. And that's almost what it is that I'm seeing in here, is like the network of light. Um, that in essence that we come together in a space in life, and that we all represent different layers of this light that is pervasive throughout every living thing, and that the water um, and mud is as much a living thing in many ways as the sky, and the oxygen and the air that we breathe is as much living as the grass and greenery and trees and bushes and the earth that we live on. And so I think that in many ways, this piece just sort of, again, is about how we're all connected. Um, I thought about many different things that I could have named this piece. At first, I thought about naming it Camp Mystique, or Mystic. It's Mystic, Camp Mystic. But I don't want to name it that, because I think it's something that's transcendent of that, and then it applies to many other things. And I don't want people to feel that they have to go there in their minds in order when they're looking at the piece. So this is the other thing I'm going to probably wrap this up with, is that when you're looking at a piece of artwork, I don't necessarily normally like to say what it is that I'm processing when I'm creating that piece of art, because that's really for me. And so normally I wouldn't probably share what I've shared in this video, but I'm sharing it in this video. What this piece particularly was about. I decided I'm going to name it Everlasting, because there's an eternal life to this that I feel and that I see when I experience it. So, Everlasting is, I believe, what I'm going to name the piece. And uh, what I want to say about it is that it's important to me to share that this is that what I like when I'm getting toward the end of a piece is that I feel a lightness in my spirit, a lightness in my soul, and that it's something that when I look at it, it connects to the cosmos in a way. So a lot of my pieces have, most of my pieces have elements of it that remind me of space and God, and like being a part of something bigger than we are, that like we're a bunch of little souls that are here, that are extensions of the bigger soul, and that through our own lives we are uh, moving through and expressing and experiencing life from our eyes and our bodies, and that we're so unique. Each one of us is so incredibly unique and special, and that all of us, when we come together, it does come together like a concert of light in different ways. That we have that within us, that we have that as humanity, that we have that as connectivity in the world, and that that's all a part of what we all bring to the table, and that we have that higher sense of self within everything that we do. And so to me, that's definitely what I want to share here with this, is that how we're all connected. And so when somebody looks at my work, what I would love for them to see is that connectivity and that light, and something that moves something positively in them, and that helps, that's like the transmutation of that energy into something good. And to me, that's what this piece is about. So normally I wouldn't be saying what the rest of it is, because that's really just about how we process things out. And I think that when you're working in your own art journals, one thing that I would like to encourage is that you sit with your piece long enough to transmute the energy of whatever it is that you brought into that session. So allowing yourself to play with the bad. I just went in on another art journal entry that I had, and oh my gosh, the page was so ugly. It was really ugly, and I was like, I'm just gonna paint on top of it. And what I completed with is something that I actually really love now. And you also don't need to love every single piece that you put into your art journals. It's really okay for you to not love every piece in your art journal. Really, art journaling and sketchbook practice is about giving yourself a safe place to get it out, kind of like handwriting down in a journal what it is that you're thinking in that moment without censoring yourself. So that's really the role of a sketchbook, and the role of an art journal is a place where you don't have to censor yourself. You're not censoring yourself to anyone in your family, uh, potentially spouse, partnership, whatever. You're not censoring there. You're not censoring to your children. If you are, if you have children, you're not censoring to anybody in your workplace. Um, it's really a place for you to go and be completely uncensored, say exactly what express exactly what you want to express on that paper. And it doesn't have to be pretty, and it doesn't have to make sense to anyone else but you. And many times that's what those pieces will be. And it also doesn't have to require a lot of thought. So, like, most of the time when I sit down, I'm not sitting down thinking, oh my gosh, I'm struggling with blah, 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 blah. I don't. I usually am like, oh, look, these colors are calling to me and I want to play with this. These supplies are calling to me and I want to play with them. This paper is calling to me and I want to play with it. Okie dokie, here we are. We're at the end, and I just want to wish you a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful day. And I hope you come back and subscribe to the channel, like it, and come back and visit again, because we're going to have a lot more fun here. Thank you so much for joining me, and I wish you a great, great, great day. Alrighty, with love and light. With love and light, CC.